Regularly scheduled Committee on Homelessness and Poverty. Welcome. I am joined by my colleagues, Vice Chair of this committee, Monica Rodriguez, and Marquise Harris Dawson, David Rue, and Mike Bonin. I will call this meeting to order. And colleagues, what I'd like to do is take multiple item comment cards first. And there are many. When you step up, please state your name very clearly for the record. And if you filled out multiple item comment cards, you have 2 minutes for all of those items. If you fill out one, you have 1 minute for that item, and then 1 minute for general public comment. So if you filled out comment cards for all the items, you get 2 minutes for those items and 1 minute for public comment. So let's start with that, and we'll start with Wayne Spindler, followed by Arnold Sachs.
Yeah, so Mr. Armando Herman is not able to be here, so he wrote some comments down, so we'll try to address these. So number one, utilizing state homeless emergency aid. How far are you niggers going to go until you do mobile shelter programs in motels? This is what we are going to do to the niggers if we do not get item number one approved. We are going to leave them homeless. Give them back to the dark garden on number two. The urgency clause. Save America. Go back to the constitutional betterment. Bury the niggers, you say. I say don't. Item three, we intend to do our part. Give us our states' rights, freedom for the whites. Nigger will have to fight for every inch he gets from now on number three. Now we have the for and against. Now why are people against item number three? Item number three is to reunite all of our family and friends, you scumbags in Selmar. How can you do this to us? We want to take all the drug addicts. We want to take all the people with scabies. We want to take all the people infected with typhus and bring it into your lovely communities so that you can experience the pleasures of these homeless people while cities like Pasadena that I recently visited. Thank you, Councilman Gordo. Thank you, Councilman Kennedy, Tyrone Kennedy, a fine man. You dump your homelessness on the city of L.A. because the city of L.A. is run by chumps and scumbags and dumb fucking shits, just like you see up here, that are going to go and hold.
1 minute for
and then you're going to fucking tax all of us up the fucking asshole and fuck us like they do Eric Garcetti every day in bed. Because we're going to take all the homeless, San Diego, all of them, San Bernardino, all of them, because the voters here are too fucking stupid to vote for people that know better. So you don't know better. You're just too fucking dumb to understand that the other cities have a place to put these fucking people right here in this fucking city. And the only one who knows it is Marquise Harris Dawson. He's the only one who knows. And he's not going to do nothing about it because he's going to wait one day when all of you white motherfuckers are in prison and he becomes the mayor. Then he's going to kick them out and send them all to Pasadena. Fuck Measure HHH. FBI, come in and indict Jose Huizar to get the party started. Thank you.
Followed by Mr. Russell, Arnold Sachs. Followed by Mr. Russell. Is Arnold Sachs in the room? Is there a Russell in the room? Anyone with the name of Russell? Antonio Ramirez. Antonia Ramirez, followed by Craig R. Is Antonia Ramirez in the room? Okay, Craig R. followed by, yeah, come on up, sir. Craig R. followed by General Dogon, followed by Patricia McAllister. Dogan. Craig R., General Dogan, and Patricia McAllister.
Yes. I'm here speaking about, among other things, item 8, but especially the homeless count. It's called a point-in-time count, and it's an interesting turn of phrase since the point in time it was taken was in January, and it's not released until, I guess the numbers have been massaged by the city powers that be in June, making the numbers somewhat irrelevant to the facts. But there is, in my opinion, one highly relevant number. 721,000 households in LA County alone are one health incident, car, one or two missed checks away from being potentially houseless. 721,000 households are that close to being homeless, in addition to the 108,000 houseless people which pass through the system every year, and 50,000 which get some additional housing, and leaving a residue of 58,000 plus as the number for the county. 36,300 for the city. Interesting number. The problem is we're building shelters, meaning the city, and especially Eric Garcetti, is building shelters and referring to them as services for housing when they ought to be building permanent supportive housing, or even more revolutionary idea ought to be building public housing owned and built by the city instead of the bullshit public-private partnership, which, as we all know, is merely a mechanism by which the powers that be, including yourselves in city government, fund their donors and their friends who are vetted developers, let's say. Developers that are approved by the city and the system, by HCID and the rest of the clowns.
You didn't do general public comment, correct? Just.
Yeah, I'm combining them.
Okay.
If you pay attention, you'll get.
Well, no, it's
get
not on my screen. That's why.
Okay.
Paying attention.
Okay. So public comments. My public comment is you ought to have some response to your mandate to help the public who are residents who are homeless today, and stop putting off things by spending heat funds on motel renovations for a shelter, motel shelter program, whatever. Build housing. Use property that the city owns or can get through eminent domain, and build housing, public housing for the people, permanent supportive housing. That would be a revolutionary act. Thank you.
Thank you. General Dogan, it looks like you have just the items, not a general public comment. Is that correct?
Yeah, I just got the 3 items.
Okay. You have 2 minutes, sir.
All right, cool. Thank you. Just wanted to say a couple things around your agenda. The first one is around heat. Just like Craig was saying, heat dollars is emergency dollars that's supposed to be used for, stuff like public health infrastructure, which the city is lacking on. Not to refurbish motels that ain't going to come on something from 6 months down the line. We need stuff right now on the streets. And what you could do right now in an increased homeless count is to administer at least some public health infrastructure on the streets, right? That's what you should be spending heat dollars on. Another thing is LASA. So I like LASA. I know they're in the house, hopefully. I like LASA, what they're talking about on the agenda about revamping programs and looking at what they got moving forward, because a lot of the people who they invested in to do a lot of work, ain't doing the right work, or either they criminalizing, for example. A lot of the people who you finance, like some of the shelters and missions, they have a lot of criminalization signs outside their building. Right on Skid Row is a prime example. You got missions and shelters. They got police enforced, no loitering. We power washing the streets from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. No hanging out. All this criminalizing stuff, which violates your new report, best principles and practice for doing outreach. So if you're going to start holding people accountable, then you need to start holding them accountable to your own reports and what you're doing, right? Because it's work. I agree with the report, right? The last thing is the 85.2, can't sleep in a vehicle. The law that this committee created the first year of this committee, right before you ran out for Christmas vacation, you passed the law, no sleeping in the car. We told you that those Dream Zone maps wasn't no good. But my problem is now all the criminalization, all the towing of cars, all the tickets. What you going to do about that? You need to amend that. So when you had a conversation about extending a map, have some conversation about how you're going to call back and make amends for all those tickets that you criminalize people for.
Thank you, sir. I understand Adam R. is here. Adam R. will be followed by Patricia McAllister. 1 minute for general public comment and 2 minutes for items 7 and 8.
Ready? Thank you, Councilmember O'Farrell.
Sure.
Well, of course we're here about the homeless count, which should have been released much earlier, as most other cities did. For example, Alameda County. Everyone Home helped run the homeless count. Their methodology, well, superior to LASA's in many ways, still left for the fact that if you want an actual number of people on the streets in Alameda County, you would have to take 3 to 5 times their number. The number on the street here is astounding. Alameda County's number, they rose 43%. Our mayor likes to quote that. However, that 43% averaged out to about 3,000 people. Los Angeles is an entirely different beast. 20 years of criminalization, hundreds of years of racist practices and segregation have created an apartheid state in downtown Los Angeles. Now, the problem we hear from all these districts is when that apartheid state spreads out to your backyard. Yet I hear, just yesterday, for example, from several of the County Board of Supervisors, which I'm assuming are the positions, I've heard similar positions here, that, you can't get people to take Section 8. It's crazy. We need more incentives. You know what the best incentive is? Fines. $5,000 a year for every vacant unit. We have over 200,000 of them in this county alone, 110,000 in this city. That's an actual solution. Use that money to build housing on those vacant lots. Go ahead. I know, 1 minute.
1 minute for general public.
Right on. On those vacant lots that have been sort of set aside to hand over to public-private partnerships, to developers that want to charge $500,000 per unit. You can create sustainable units for $30,000 to $50,000. People do it all the time. Container homes, there's 3D printed solutions, there's actual future solutions that we could use right here on city-owned land to house these people. I mean, really, aren't you embarrassed to be in charge of the homeless capital of the country? Second in the world only to Sao Paulo, Brazil, last time I checked. That doesn't embarrass you? The solutions that have come out of this committee so far have been half measures, putting a Band-Aid on a bullet wound. You need to address the problem. Unfortunately, we have only a few industries in LA. The movies, development, and poverty, which unfortunately seems to include our elected officials benefiting from the poverty industry. Thank you.
Thank you. Patricia McAllister, followed by Daniel Flaming, followed by Joanna Swan. Patricia McAllister. Don't think she's here. Daniel Flaming. Daniel Flaming is here. Will be followed by Joanna Swan and Catherine Mullen. And Daniel, it looks like you have one general public comment and one item. So 1 minute for each, sir.
Thanks very much. My name's Daniel Flaming. I'm the president of the Economic Roundtable. We're a research group located here in Los Angeles, and I wanted to share a recent report with you. The report presents tools for identifying people who will become persistently homeless so that they can be helped at the onset of homelessness before there's so much damage. The tools focus on employment as a solution. So the concept is to address homelessness not just as a housing problem, which is very important, but also a problem of income and of equipping people to earn an income. So I have 5 copies of this report to share with the committee. I'm available to talk to any of your offices that would like more information about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, and we'll take those copies. If you give them to the sergeant, we'll distribute them right now. Thank you, sir. Joanna Swan, followed by Catherine Mullen. And Joanna Swan, you have 2 minutes for the 2 items, items 2 and 3.
Yeah, so I guess I'll start with the 8502. I'm Joanna Swan with the Services Not Sweeps Coalition and the Democratic Socialists of America. So 8502 is just going to cause more trauma, more criminalization, and more homelessness. We've seen a really pretty drastic rise in people living in vehicles this past year. And as Peter Lynn said yesterday, those people are the hardest to count. They're the most invisible. They're the hardest to get services to. So by criminalizing their lives further and their only place to live, you're actually just contributing to the problem. And safety spaces or green zones or whatever else we're trying to put in that, interestingly enough, all the bids seem to be getting exempted from are not helping either, because we see valet parking put there. We see metro bike parking there. We see parking enforcements that result in tickets and more criminalization in this regard too. So please reconsider 8502 as another form of criminalizing the poor. I guess on to the homeless town. Where do we start? It's pretty disturbing. I was doing a lot of canvassing in the last couple weeks, and a lot of people are anti-EE. A lot of those same people are anti-homeless, and I know you're hearing from a lot of them now. They're making differentiations between the sympathetic homeless, the women and the youth, and the people who are, quote, drug addicts and criminals. This is a very dangerous distinction that actually reminds me a lot of the rhetoric we hear from Donald Trump, Rodrigo Duterte. This is taking us down a very dangerous road that will result in more deaths and more criminalization. So please consider what side you are on. It's time for you to take a position. Stop listening to the wealthiest property owners in the city, as you've continued to do, while not supporting tenants, not supporting Prop 10, and not supporting further legislation that could help our unhoused. Thank you.
Thank you. We all supported unanimously the passage of Prop 10.
So services not sweeps. And so support tenants in your district, Mitch,
and
when they're going on strike against landlords.
That's my turn. We're building more affordable housing, rent covenant for 55 years in the 13th district, in the thousands.
Yeah, we see a lot of hotels too.
Great. But this council supported Prop 10. We took a resolution where we would love for the state to reform Costa-Hawkins. And I hope we can all get on board with convincing the state that that's what they need to do next. All right, next we have Catherine Mullen, 1 minute for general public comment and 1 minute for item 2, followed by Matt Fisher and then Sean Murphy.
Hi
Welcome.
there. Thank you. I own the Stronghold Climbing Gym, which is a part of the Brewery Arts Complex, and it is an area that's zoned industrial but has a lot of residential use in that complex. And unfortunately, there are lots of homeless people who are sleeping on the area's streets every night. They're entrenched. Some of them are known drug dealers. And I'm simply here to say that there has been a large impact to my business and to my neighbors because we live and work next to encampments that are quite difficult to be around. I am very sympathetic to the homeless. I know that it's a problem that you're all wrestling with via every strategy you can think of. But I am just saying that because we're living and working in this industrial zone with a residential use, we're bearing the brunt of a lot of that impact. And it's been really hard for business, and it's been really hard for the neighbors. Some of my neighbors will tell you more.
You have another minute because
Okay.
you had 1 minute for
wanna-
general and then 1 minute for item 2.
Okay, I don't want to draw it out. I know that this issue has lots of sides to it, but I would respectfully request that you consider extending the residential ban on parking to residential use zones, such as those around the Brewery Arts Complex. Thank you.
Thank you. Matt Fisher, followed by Sean Murphy, followed by the Red Chief Hunt.
I'm Matt Fisher. I have 25 years of experience in homelessness research, 15 years of that was spent on the street. Recently had a report, city workers in LA spraying homeless people with pesticides In return for that favor, I was retaliated against with 8502, threatened to arrest me for being in my vehicle near a park. In turn, they've continued to harass me, give me tickets, tow me, and tell me good luck in the election every time they do with a hello from our district. We need to stop this. This is not a tool to harass people. We don't have services that will take these people in. They cannot get into a shelter if they own an RV. You cannot make, that's an unconstitutional decision right there. You're really screwing over people, and this is going to come down to court. Please bring more of these reunification programs to Venice as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, we have Sean Murphy, followed by the Red Chief Hunt, followed by Val Carlson. Val Carlson is here. Sean Murphy, Chief Hunt. Then Andrea Theodore. Andrea Theodore, if you're here, make your way up, please. Oh, welcome.
Thank you. I signed up for public comment and another item. I was trying to sign out for your item 8, but your machine back there didn't know about it. So.
Okay, so 2 minutes for item 6 and 8, and then 1 minute for general public comment.
Thank you.
Or 5 and 8, rather.
Okay. It's no surprise to the End Homelessness Now Los Angeles campaign that the 2019 homeless count is up 16% in the city of Los Angeles and 12% for the county, and probably a lot more. An awful lot of estimating was going on, and an awful lot of sugarcoating appeared to be given to us all yesterday at the county board meeting. Bureaucratic floundering and corporate welfare to developers have miserably failed to solve this growing catastrophe. As Steve Lopez said in today's Times, the process for building housing with voter-approved millions from Measure HHH is maddeningly slow, and the cost per unit as high as $500,000 or more screams out for a new model. The permanent supportive public housing that End Homelessness Now campaign calls for is that new model. Here's why. Publicly owned housing will never revert to market rate housing. 55 years may seem like a long ways out, but 30 years seemed like a long ways out in 1988, and at this point about 20,000 people in this county are threatened with or are already being chased out of that low-income housing because it's all going to market rate once again. Secondly, the public rent and Section 8 funding that would be paid to the city if they were the public owner of this property could be used for maintenance and expansion of the programs instead of, again, being part of six-figure millionaire executives' private profits. It would be less expensive and more cost-effective to do public property because no profits and tax breaks would be gifted to developers and private landlords. The city and other government agencies already own vacant and underused property that could quickly and directly be converted into permanent supportive public housing. In many countries like Sweden, Finland, and Austria, large-scale public housing prevents homelessness and provides quality and affordable housing for a majority of the population. Los Angeles has much to learn from these models and should follow their lead immediately.
Thank you. You have 1 minute for general public comment. With respect to the shelters that are going up all over the place, I think a lot of them have great potential for permanent supportive public housing. They are facilities, either vacant land or facilities that will be remodeled at the cost of $3 or $4 million each. But that is only supposed to last 3 or 4 years. Then those same beds will evaporate, and that nicely improved property will go where? Back to the private sector and the profit makers once again. That is not sustainable. Every one of those should be looked at for the ability to actually house people permanently now. Agency heads and social workers lined up yesterday bemoaning greatly the fact that they spend all of this time talking to people on the streets and in their cars and having them fill out endless forms and then having to say after all of that over and over again, well, we don't have anything now. The bridge housing is a bridge to nowhere until we have permanent supportive public housing. Thank you. Thank you. Kai Hatsumi, I understand, is here. Kai Hatsumi? Maybe not. Kai? All right, Kai's here. All right, all right. All good, all good. All good. We have Eddie H. An Eddie H. And is there a Jackie Goldberg? All right, someone's having some fun back there. Kai Hatsumi and Eddie H. Mr. Hatsumi, you have 1 minute for general public comment and then 2 minutes for all the items.
Okay.
Are you Eddie H?
Yes.
Would you like to start before?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Eddie H., Los Angeles Community Action Network. In a meeting we had with the mayor on July 29th, 2015, my opening salvo was basically this, that there is not now nor has there ever been a comprehensive strategy, a clear articulation of a comprehensive strategy as it relates to homelessness and homeless services. Today, there still is not a comprehensive strategy. One thing the mayor took from that meeting is that he stole our language. If you look at the timeline, the day following that meeting, he started using comprehensive strategy. But the material conditions on the ground have not changed. But as we know, at LA Can, the $1.2 billion of Triple H money that we fought so valiantly to have passed, we made 100,000 phone calls, we made 10,000 site visits, and today all of that money has been either been allocated or it's gone. Not one permanent supportive housing unit has come online. I think Mr. Dawson would tell you that the first available units are supposed to be in his district. The time of that coming online has been changed. But what has happened is that this city has spent an enormous amount of money on other things other than getting people housed. They spent money on shelters, and the majority part of that money is in criminalization. They spent more money on criminalizing the homeless than they actually did put it into shelters. They've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on consultants. They have now just received a grant from the United Way for a crisis team to come into City Hall, I guess, to tell the mayor what he should be doing about homelessness. This is egregious and reprehensible. And to us at LA Can, it's unacceptable. While people continue to die on the street, the number's up from 800 to 1,200 individuals who have died over the past year.
Thank you, sir.
But I have
Well, no, you had
yeah.
1 minute for public comment and 1 minute for an item, so that was 2 minutes.
That was 2 minutes?
Yeah, it was. It was.
Are you certain?
I'm certain. And we have to be really consistent. We have to be consistent.
Yeah.
So thank you.
That is just like the city, right?
No, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Kai Hatsumi, sir, you have 1 minute for general public comment and 2 minutes for all the other items.
I want to say I'm totally opposed to the mayor's shelter program because what it does is it shelters people for a certain amount of time only, not the whole year around, and it only shelters part of those that are in the encampment. The rest are being criminalized by the LAPD because the mayor's program is once the shelter is built, there will be no encampment. He doesn't know what a shelter is. I have experienced what a shelter is at the Union Rescue Mission before they moved to Skid Row. And it's so regimented. It's not housing. Okay? So why he calls a shelter program bridge housing is a fraud. It's a shelter. Call it what it is, a shelter. It's not housing. That's, when I was at the Union Rescue Mission, I also experienced what it's like to be at the LA Mission in Skid Row. At least I had a bed there. In the Union Rescue Mission, it was 500 people sleeping, sitting on a chair. And up early in the morning, you have to get out. The shelter program, you got to be out. You got to be out 6 in the morning. You're not in until late at night. So I'm totally opposed to the mayor's shelter program. We need permanent supportive housing for the homeless. Yeah.
Thank you. Is Chief Hunt here? I think maybe the Red Chief Hunt is not here. So we have Chris Roth, followed by Friedel Cushman, followed by Heather Gales.
Good afternoon. My name is Chris Roth. I'm with Ground Game Los Angeles and Koreatown for All and a number of other organizations. I just wanted to point out a simple observation that we made during the conference at the County Board of Supervisors meeting yesterday. While we were discussing amongst ourselves what was going on with the statistics that were coming out, it is a very bizarre situation that the city of Los Angeles, which is known for having such great weather almost the entire year round, chooses to conduct the homeless count for the point-in-time count during the coldest, wettest, rainiest month of the year, when people are going to be huddled together in tents that get counted as a single individual, despite the fact that we know that there are probably more than one individual in most of these tents because it is cold out and they are trying to stay warm. It would make a lot more sense to be doing the homeless count sometime during the summer months. In addition to that, it would be very easy and inexpensive for the city to deploy a number of mobile showers and portable bathroom facilities all around the neighborhoods to greatly alleviate the suffering that is needlessly happening on our streets. Thank you.
Thank you. Andrea Theodore, followed by Heather Gales, followed by Jill Sykes.
Hi, I'm Friedel Cushman. I'm happy to see everyone. When I think about what systems could look like, I think about a human being's physiological needs for homeostasis, and I unpair that from any profit or market economy. With that said, and I recognize there's a lot of work being done by the City Council, it would be beneficial to think about how to organize, grassroots organize City Council themselves around these physiological needs and around unpairing housing from the profit economy here locally, and that could be a template for the nation. I think Los Angeles County is already leading the way and could lead the way in systems change. Thank you for your service.
Thank you. And before we start, is Steve Diaz here? Steve Diaz? Steve Diaz is here. Okay. So please identify, state your name, and what we have is Andrea Theodore with item number 3. 1 minute.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Yes, I came today because I saw there's a neighborhood council here, Somar Neighborhood Council, that is in opposition of a reunification for family and friends. Homeless people have the right to access services and outreach in hospitals and nursing homes. I've witnessed elderly women with Alzheimer's and dementia, and their families are notified by the coroner's office. So there needs to be some kind of safety net for vulnerable women, women with addiction issues, men, with trauma issues, and I feel like this is a wonderful program, and I'm surprised that it's not already there, and we need to support advocates because the social workers in hospitals and nursing homes are understaffed, and the shelter system cannot be a revolving door for people that can get help from their families and other resources in the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Heather?
My name is Heather Gales. Hello. I'm talking about the overnight parking, which is an important initiative, but something significant has been overlooked. The map defining the areas where overnight parking is sanctioned is based on zoning alone, with no provision for permitted use. I'm here to represent the Brewery Artist Lofts, an artist community with hundreds of residents, including Stronghold Climbing Gym. As previously mentioned, we are located in an industrial zoned area, but have mixed-use live-work studio spaces made possible by the Artist in Residence Code. As a result of 8502 as currently configured, we have had a large number of negative impacts to the community, many of which are explicitly enumerated in the ordinance as problems it was created to solve. Fortunately, we see a very straightforward solution to the unintended consequences overnight parking has had in our community and other mixed-use communities. To that end, I request the definition of residential street in Section 1B, Item 3, be amended to include the following: or parcel or residential use is permitted. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Steve Diaz, you have two items, one general public and comment, and then one item number 8, so 1 minute for each.
Thank you. Good afternoon, committee members. My name is Steve Diaz, and I am with the Los Angeles Community Action Network, LA CAN. As we woke up today, we all heard the stories about the double-digit increase in houselessness across LA. The story behind it is the increase in rent burden and the overall unaffordability of our city. To quote Councilmember Rio, it's time for action. It's time for bold action. What does bold action mean? It means ending the 3% floor that is guaranteed under the city's RSO. It means ending the unjust pass-through that tenants face when landlords pay utilities and gas that were shown not to have an economic linkage in 2010. It also means moving forward the Councilmember O'Farrell motion and Wesson motion that came in the eve of the Costa-Hawkins defeat of Prop 10, where the department was asked, the housing department was asked to come forth with recommendations around how to better strengthen RSO and tenant protections across the city of LA. Housing and homelessness are directly connected. These are a couple of bold actions that could be taken now. Thank you.
Thank you. Jill Sykes, Kara Fortier, and here's a familiar name, John Walsh. But I think maybe there's not a John Walsh out there. But we've got Jill Sykes. Yeah, someone's having some fun out there. Kara Fortier, and then Roya Fulati. My apologies. Yes, Jill Sykes?
Yeah, I'm also here from the Brewery Art Colony, and I'm mostly concerned about the RV parking overnight. It has definitely negatively impacted our community in terms of parking, in terms of people coming onto the property and stealing things. It keeps people awake at night. These guys are out there doing all sorts of things that are illegal, and it's definitely impacting in terms of if you want to have your business people come and park, there's no place for them to park. We can no longer walk up and down the street. The neighborhood isn't safe at all anymore, and I've been there since 1996. So I have a lot of empathy for the situation. I don't know what the solution is, but I think overnight parking so close to a residential area, and frankly very close to some schools, is not helping anybody. So that's why I came, because it's not safe.
Thank you. Kara?
Yes.
Fortier?
Hi. I don't envy your task. I'm here regarding the same thing, the Brewery Artist Colony. The unintended consequence that I would like to talk about is policing, and I understand they're spread very thin. But I had someone try to murder a woman outside of my kitchen window one evening. I heard the entire thing. It was a traffic. He smashed her between his car and an RV. It was a very traumatic incident. The police put it down as an accident. When I went in to try to put in my own report, to make sure they knew it was not an accident, that he did it on purpose, I was told by one of the detectives that it would be probably possible to have him prosecuted based on my testimony alone, but that before I would be able to do that, my name, address, and phone number would be given to the victim and the perpetrator who live outside my kitchen window. And he said to let Vice take care of it. That was January, and I'm not saying, I know that they are very spread thin, but for something like that to happen outside of my bedroom window, I want the zoning to be looked at again. And they're still there. They still live there. So.
Thank you. Thank you. Roya Fulati, followed by Tom Grode.
Good afternoon. I'm here to comment on the motion to extend 8502 and to point out to the committee that there has been a fundamental error within it because it, as currently written, the definition of residential only includes parcels that are intended or zoned for single-family or multifamily residential use. So you have a property like the Brewery Arts Complex, which takes up a massive amount of land. It's 22 acres square. There are over 300 people living there. And we are bounded by 3 streets, all of which are green zoned for RV overnight dwelling. As a result, we are surrounded by RVs. The situation is becoming untenable, and we have been bearing a burden that is not borne by any other multifamily residential lot in the city. Therefore, I would urge somebody to please today move to amend the motion as it's currently written, to amend it to include a new definition of residential, to include industrial uses that permit residential.
Thank you. And we have Tom Grode, and yeah, that concludes our speakers. Tom Tom Grode. Item number 8.
My name's Tom Grody. I'm part of the Skid Row Community Improvement Coalition, and some of us interacted with you recently because of the Skid Row Community Refresh Spot. This is the Understanding Native American Homelessness in Los Angeles County, which was released recently by the LA City and County Native American Indian Commission. So I'm approaching these new Lawson numbers based on Indian Alley and Skid Row, which is one of the most well-known native urban locations in the entire country. What this report shows and the new Lawson numbers confirm is the need for systemic change. And so Councilmember O'Farrell will be following up with Starr, since that's who we interacted with before.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. So, colleagues, we're going to read items 2 and 7, and then I'm going to recommend that we take them on consent. If they could please be read into the record.
Item number 2, motion O'Farrell Wesson relative to an ordinance to extend Los Angeles Municipal Code Section 8502 for 6 months. That includes an urgency clause.
Maybe everyone can't hear you.
Oh.
Yeah, just bring it right up close.
Like this.
There you go. You've got 3 now.
Item number 2, motion O'Farrell Wesson relative to an ordinance to extend Los Angeles Municipal Code Section 8502 for 6 months. That includes an urgency clause.
And 7? Mm-hmm.
Item number 7, Los Angeles City Planning Commission report and ordinance relative to amending the Los Angeles Municipal Code to make technical amendments to align with emergency shelter regulations in state law.
All right, thank you. So colleagues, without objection, we will move those on consent. And that brings us to item 1, if we could read that into the record.
Item number 1, motion Martinez Harris Dawson relative to a funding request to utilize state homeless emergency aid funds for a motel shelter enhancement program to expand and enrich the motel shelter program in Council District 6.
And we've been requested to note and file item number 1. And then if you could please read item 3 into the record.
Item number 3, Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority report relative to the full assessment of all reunification programs serving homeless individuals in the city and feasibility of establishing a standalone family and friends reunification program, including budget for street outreach and public awareness campaign.
All right, so colleagues, what I'd like to do is recommend that we continue item 3 and ask the department to come back with an updated written report on recommendations from the motion, as well as report on the following. What proactive efforts LASA is taking to locate family members, where they think there are areas of improvement in their family reunification efforts, and what they're doing to address them. What is their intake process as it relates to family reunification, and how can we improve that process? Identification of other models that are known to be very successful at reunification, wherever those models can exist. We'll schedule the report back along with a budget memo related to the subject at a future hearing of this committee.
Just had a question.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just had a question for staff on this reunification matter. So if somebody from LASA can answer this, I think it would be helpful to me.
Mr. Lynn, if you or someone from LASA.
I sure appreciate it, Mr. Lynn.
Will do my utmost, but I don't hold myself out to be an expert in all the details. Peter Lynn, Executive Director of the Los Angeles Homeless Service Authority.
So this is purely anecdotal, but when I've gone out with workers, oftentimes they'll ask people if they have family or if they need to get somewhere, and then other times they don't. So what is exactly the practice that we should expect outreach workers to be doing? Do we have situations where we find out after we've been working with someone for months that they, really just wanted to go somewhere else? or is it? I guess how do they decide who gets asked and who doesn't, and what happens from there?
Okay, this is a really good question. So one of the challenges that we have had as a continuum is that there have been a wide plurality of different efforts that are out there doing outreach, some of which is funded, some of which is ad hoc, some of which is community-based and faith-based. It's community organizations doing, essentially untrained, unpaid outreach work. And all of that sort of looks the same, often from the perspective of people on the street. So we have worked diligently to train both LASA staff, that is the one service we provide directly, but also our direct funded agencies, and then our partner agencies, because many of the multidisciplinary teams that put behavioral health specialists out and public health nursing and other skilled health practices out on the street, to have a similar functional set of questions. The other thing is that this kind of question.
One of them,
yes,
is
and one of them is definitely, what was your situation before you became homeless? What would it take to get you back there? Is there someplace you can go? All of those kinds of questions. So one, obviously an intervention that we love to do is to get people back with their family. It often requires the least amount of time, the least amount of financial intervention. We will do that, getting people back out to communities that, if it's a different community, another part of the state or the country, we'll put people on buses, even planes sometimes if they need that, but only after we've made a firm agreement from the person on the other end that there's somebody to pick them up. We never send people away unless there's a commitment that somebody's on the other end to receive them. But we'll do that all day long. If that were the answer, we would do that all day long.
And so, is there data? Do you have out of 100 people?
Can we bring that back? Because it is one of the interventions. Yes.
Mr. Chair, I would just ask that we add the data that we have. What we have.
Absolutely, to incorporate. Yes, sure.
But I also want to represent that this is a practice that we are not just pushing for outreach, but also for upstream into our mainstream interactions with people who are, the family source centers, the work source centers, the youth source centers. These are all interventions that the city deploys where the staff could be trained with these kind of problem-solving conversations and a toolkit to say, if you're presenting in crisis, okay, what's going on? Is there a conflict? Is it financial? Is it interpersonal? Are these things that we can work through with a conflict mediation or with some amount of financial assistance? So that kind of problem-solving, negotiating technique, which we used to think of as a diversion technique, but we think of, it's applicable generally for people experiencing homelessness and also upstream who aren't, literally about to be homeless, but they're in a crisis. Trying to get that training out to the entire network of people who are interfacing with people in poverty and people in crisis with some central pool of financial assistance that can be accessed to, sometimes it doesn't take very much. A few $100s can keep somebody in a unit. So all of that work is going on simultaneously. I'd love to bring that back and report more thoroughly.
Ms. Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just as a follow-up, so the SPOT leads, though, do engage in that reunification conversation, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And then also just through the traditional CES, as they're going kind of checking the boxes of all the opportunities.
That's correct.
It's also investigating.
That's exactly right.
Right.
That's
okay.
exactly right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And just to tag along on that is we work very closely with Covenant House in Hollywood.
Yes.
I wouldn't say it's a specialization of theirs, but they really do focus on family reunification as well. And you might already share a collaboration with what they do and in terms of the template that they use.
But this actually is a practice area that came out of our youth-focused work.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually a skill that's one of the reasons why it's really helpful to have intersectionality between the different population, groups and the coordinated entry system, is that effective practice areas can be learned by the other elements of, and this is a youth. Mm-hmm. Sorry. Mm-hmm. So I appreciate the technical assistance there. This is a practice area that was really perfected and honed in the work that looks at transition age youth and has been learned outward in the other elements of the homeless assistance system. And we do work with Covenant House.
Terrific. Okay, so we'll incorporate this data request and other elements of this report in the report back. Oh, Mr. Bonin, yes.
Thanks. I appreciate this, and I agree with the direction the committee's going in. I just wanted to point one thing out here, because there's often a huge difference between what we say here at the table and what happens out in the field.
True.
And one of my enduring frustrations about dealing with homelessness is that on the ground, the people who are providing services or the people who work for nonprofits all tend to be very attached to whatever their model is. And I've always referred to it as being sort of like religious wars. So, there are people who think the solution is PSH. There are some people who think the solution is reunification. There are some people who think the solution, whatever. I mean, there's a variety of things. And I'm not convinced that even though it's a tool in the kit, that people are using the tool appropriately, think that it's actually of value, or that it's something that fits the model of their broader job description. And I think that's the sort of the busting of the silo mentalities is what's sort of key to this.
Yes.
When I first mentioned reunification 3 or 4 years ago, people said, "Oh, no, because you're sending people back to abusive households." In some cases, absolutely no doubt that's true. In a lot of cases, absolutely not true. We've had a lot of very successful reunifications.
Right.
My neighborhood council has done a lot of them, and we need to, I think, disabuse folks of a preconceived notion of what the outcome or cause would be.
Thank you. It's a complex region. There are a lot of service providers. There have been a lot of sort of practice theories that have gone through. We've been working to educate folks. It's complex, but I don't disagree. We're trying to make sure that everybody at least has an understanding of the full array of tools that are available.
Thank you. We look forward to seeing the written report with these ideas incorporated. Thank you. All right, I'd like to go to item 6 now. If you could please read item 6.
Item number 6, California Environmental Quality Act, analysis and categorical exemption from CEQA pursuant to Article 19, Section 15332, Class 32 of the State of California CEQA guidelines relative to establishing bridge housing at a site owned by the California Department of Transportation located at 515 North Beacon Street in Council District 15.
Thank you. We have CAO Meg Barkley, who is going to read in some technical changes, I understand, before we approve this as amended.
Yes, we have a technical amendment that's been distributed to you and the members of the committee and the clerk that will basically just allow the use of funds for furniture, fixtures, and equipment that will be going through the Los Angeles Homelessness Services Authority to come from the HEAP funding rather than the funding rather than general fund. Mm-hmm. And this is just for purpose of consistency and expediency.
All right. We have that language and we're good to go? All right. Thank you. So we'll approve the report as amended without objection.
Thank you.
Thank you, Meg. All right. Brings us to item 5.
Item number 5, City Administrative Officer Report relative to the grant award from the United Way of Greater Los Angeles to support staffing of the Housing Crisis Solutions team within the Mayor's Office of Citywide Homelessness Initiatives.
Thank you, Ms. Amatia. And we have the Crisis Solutions team from the Mayor's Office to present. Item.
Hi.
Hi, welcome.
From the City Office of the CAO. As mentioned before, this item pertains to the acceptance of a grant award in the amount of up to $1.5 million from the United Way. These grant funds will be used to finance the salaries of 5 positions within the Mayor's Office of Citywide Homelessness Initiatives, and also will support contractual services to support implementation and evaluation of the Housing Innovation Challenge pilot over a 3-year performance period. I also have a set of technical corrections that I've submitted, and they should be adopted in order to align with both the timing of the position start dates and disbursement of funds and appropriate fiscal year. I have Ben Winter here, who's available to answer any questions regarding the program.
All right, thank you. Would you like to present a little bit before we get into it? questions or comments?
Sure. Also, we're joined by Sean Spear, Assistant General Manager from HSID. As you can see, this I'm sure you're all very familiar with this particular item. It was as HSID and the rest of the departments have been implementing the traditional permanent supportive housing pipeline. The Prop HHH Citizens Oversight Committee sent to the Council recommendations that the Mayor's office create a red team to oversee the implementation of a new Triple H pilot program whose goal was to create 1,000 units of supportive housing through innovative construction and/or finance models. After the Council adopted these recommendations, our office has been working closely with HCLA leadership and the CEO's office to identify ways to build the city's capacity to create and administer this new Triple H program without taking away focus from the traditional permanent supportive housing pipeline, which has grown dramatically within the last 2 years. As such, we fundraised up to $1.51 million from the United Way and their philanthropic partners to support 3 staff to implement the Triple H Housing Challenge with HCLA. 1 staff person focused on cross-departmental coordination for troubleshooting the entire Triple H and supportive housing pipeline through the development process with multiple city departments, and an additional analyst to support HCLA and the city on metrics evaluation and implementation on these programs. Since the Prop HHH Housing Challenge is already underway, it was launched on May 9th, and applications are due later this month on June 24th. We've already started that hiring process in an expedited way, and we may have staff people start as early as next week and throughout the next month. We're holding the hiring process for one of those positions vacant for now until we've kind of secured all of the authorizations from council and accepted the funds before we move forward. So with that, Sean, would you like to say any other questions? Or?
Yeah, just very quickly, Sean Spear from Housing Department. The primary...
Sir, please let the gentleman speak.
So the real hope is that this team will help augment the existing staff we have working on HHH. And while we are really having sort of a triage process in terms of a number of units being dedicated to moving the projects forward, our work is going to essentially move primarily from a commitment stage to a loan closing and construction stage. And really we feel that's where the additional staff coming through this grant will be most helpful. Specifically in terms of helping the developers navigate the public entitlements process and moving their projects forward in an expedited manner. So we're really looking forward to working cooperatively with this group of folks that will be hired shortly.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you. A couple of quick questions that I have, and we can open it up, and that is, the report talks about the related costs, and that if there are additional unknown costs, they could be covered by the mayor's office, perhaps in the city budget. Are there funds that might be identified in the budget that's coming in 2019-2020 budget that we're aware of in terms of...
Back for our budget team, so apologies
Okay.
they're not here, but the idea is that the city, the mayor's office would cover the benefits and overhead costs for these salaries as a match for the grant.
Any sense of the ballpark figure of that could be? I mean, it's probably a stretch to even like throw out a number, but it sounds like the fundraising is going well. It sounds like the program is moving fairly smoothly, but it'd be nice to get a sense of what those related costs could be.
It's in here. I believe it's about a third. The overhead and benefits account for a third of the total cost of these employees.
Okay, all right. And so with the employees, so once the innovation fund is drawn down and the monies are accounted for in the coming months, once the bids are returned, what work might there be for these additional positions once we're seeing this whole process sunset? Will the positions evolve into something else within HCID, for example, or?
Yeah, well, first of all, the Triple H pilot program is really, we expect it to last for the full duration of this grant, about 3 years. Work certainly does not end after the applicants are selected. This team will support HCID-LA in developing all the funding agreements and underwriting for the actual individual projects and monitor construction draws, just as we do for the Triple H program. In the event that well, the idea of this program is to get projects built quicker, right? So hopefully we'll have additional staff capacity with this team to also assist with the broader Triple H program as well to help support staff.
Yeah. I would just add that as the program moves forward, there may be opportunities for recapture of HHH dollars off of previously committed deals, which in turn may mean that those deals would start a little bit later in the process. So we would anticipate there would be the need for their activities and services into year 4, year 5.
The other task for this team, I would say, this is really a team focused on housing innovation. And the mayor's office has been successful on securing 2 additional grants of $1 million, one from Bloomberg Philanthropies and one from Citibank to support other innovative housing initiatives. So I think the idea is if we have more capacity on this team, that team will actively be pursuing other grant opportunities for the city in partnership with HCID-LA and other departments for additional innovative solutions for the housing crisis.
Terrific. Thank you. Thank you. Colleagues? Questions? Mr. Rue?
I just want to thank the United Way for stepping up and giving us this grant, especially when it comes to coordination of services. As many of us have experienced while we're trying to build our various projects in our districts, more coordination could be definitely useful, and we applaud your efforts and we thank you for your partnership for everything you do, not just for this grant, but for everything you've done, everybody in campaign and helping with education and outreach. So I just want to really thank you for this.
We do have a representative from the United Way here as well, Emily. Right here. Available for questions if needed.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Emily. I echo Mr. Rue's comments, and we all do. I mean, we really are, all in on this, and so we really appreciate your generosity. Thank you. All right, so the report was amended, as you heard, so I recommend that we approve the report as amended. Yeah. No objections? That'll be the action. Thank you so much. And that brings us to item number 4.
Item number 4, motion Rodriguez-Martinez relative to the invitation for the Los Angeles County Health Department to present on how it plans to manage and implement the provisions of SB 1152, Chapter 981, relative to the requirement that each hospital, including the county's hospital system, to have a written homeless discharge planning policy and process that includes the documentation of specified information before discharging a homeless patient.
This is an initiative of our colleague, Ms. Rodriguez, so I'm going to hand it over to her to take this item from here.
Thank you, colleagues. And I just want to kind of give some background quickly on why you're all here, and I want to thank all of you for joining us this afternoon. The county is currently in an EIR phase for a proposed expansion of the UCLA Medical Center campus in my district in Sylmar. And it includes the addition of restorative village and recuperative care beds. All of U's mental health, urgent care, and emergency services serve the entire San Fernando Valley, Antelope Valleys, and just the broader geography of the greater San Fernando Valley and surrounding areas. As many of you could imagine, many community members perceive that the homeless patients exiting all of you are left to fend for themselves in the community of Sylmar, a neighborhood they don't know or have community in. And given SB 1152's new requirements that all hospitals have a homeless patient discharge strategy effective July 1st, 2019, it is timely for us to have a better understanding of your protocols and mitigation measures that the county has currently in place or will be adding to ensure homeless patients are connected to resources and make the most successful exit and the community is not impacted. We do have reps, and I see our Valley Bureau Chief, Chris Pitcher, and Sergeant Case from our HOPE team, members of the City Attorney's Office who are also here. I know LAFD was here, but they're listening, so hello, LAFD, wherever you are. But again, my thanks to you all for coming here for this very important presentation.
Thank you, Councilmember Rodriguez, and thank you for having us, honorable members of the committee. My name is Eric Matos. I am the Health Deputy to Los Angeles County Supervisor Catherine Barger, and with us we have our county team. I will let them introduce themselves at this time.
Hello, thanks again for having us, and thank you, Councilmember Rodriguez, for introducing the motion. My name is Angelica Ayala, and I'm the Health Deputy for Supervisor Kuehl.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having us. My name is Charmaine Dorsey, and I'm the Department of Health Services Director for Patient and Social Support Services.
And again, thank you for having us. My name is Judith Moss, and I'm the CEO of all of you.
Yeah, so just some background for you all. All of the UCLA Medical Center is in the 5th supervisorial district, but the surrounding communities of Sylmar fall within Supervisor Kuehl's 3rd supervisorial district. So this is a group effort on behalf of both Supervisor Barger and Supervisor Kuehl, and this is a countywide effort, which we'll get a little bit more into with the slideshow that we have. You know, this is building a restorative care village. We're looking at doing this at every single campus, and we'll get into more details of that shortly. For now, let's see if we can get the slideshow presentation up, just so we can get it started.
We also have hard copies, and maybe we could just get started with those.
Yeah. Okay. While we figure this out, we'll go ahead and kick it off.
They all have one.
Everyone has one?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, great.
All right, so I will get started. Again, Charmaine from Department of Health Services. And I want to first talk a little bit about SB 1152, Senate Bill 1152, and kind of what's happening with DHS, Department of Health Services, and our response to that. First, I would like to share, though, that prior to Senate Bill 1152, the Department of Health Services facilities did have discharge planning policies in place, policies and procedures that help to assess all patients that are coming in the hospital, to assess for those that may be experiencing homelessness as well. What Senate Bill 1152 did for us was essentially provide some specific guidelines around documentation requirements to ensure that when we're meeting those requirements and that we have a way to document and report that out. So some of the things that the bill requires are, assuring that the person leaving the hospital has weather appropriate clothing, is offered a meal, has appropriate vaccinations are offered, appropriate prescriptions, medical follow-up, much of which we were doing within our facilities. In addition, it's a documentation requirement related to being able to show that we've done what we said we've done, we've offered what we've offered in the medical record. So as a result of that, what we've done is we have created an addendum to our existing policies, which outline very specifically the requirements for Senate Bill 1152. So that is already finalized and attached to each of the facilities' policies currently. The other thing that we have done is
I'm sorry, just to clarify, so this is an ongoing practice now with the documentation?
Yes.
Okay.
The other thing we did was we created what's called an ad hoc form. We're a part of an electronic medical record. So we created what's called an ad hoc form. So for the patients that are screened, and we're doing screening for every patient at registration consistently, so standardizing that practice of screening for people and the patients when they come in the facility, and we are able to document in the medical record if they have indicated that they are homeless or we know that they're experiencing homelessness. That automatically triggers this process. This form is an interprofessional form, meaning social workers, doctors, nurses all have a part on this form. Part of the form indicates the conversation we've had with the person, that we've offered the services, including the food, the clothing, where they're being discharged to. All the requirements established by SB 1152 are included on this form. SB 1152 also indicates that they want that we need to have a report. What this form does is it feeds directly into an electronic report so that if we're ever asked to pull information, we're able to do that at very granular level, at the patient level, to be able to see that we've hit all of those requirements. So that is in place now. We just went live with that, and the education has gone out to the providers.
And that went live when? When did that go live?
That went this week. This week, yeah. So, well, it went out last week, and then the education's sort of ongoing. So that blast for our electronic medical record went out last week. But it's been an ongoing process in terms of the development, and it's actually being utilized now. So we've also automated the process to be able to order weather appropriate clothing so that each of the facilities has the ability to do that and stock it and track it, which we weren't able to do, in such a uniform way before, but are now. And so that's part of our response. I would say that discharge planning happens early on, the identification happens early on, and it is a dedicated team of people. We've actually increased some of our staffing in our emergency rooms and inpatient. There was a comment earlier about the staffing of social work, and so we have been able to assist with some of that in terms of being able to address those needs, assessing for discharge, linking them to the appropriate level of discharge, and the resourcing from that point and being able to document that. So addressing issues like food insecurity, things like that. So that's in place. I think I covered most of what was on here. So what I would say is I'll introduce Judy, who's able to really talk through, kind of to your point, the projects that we have ongoing on our campuses. This is a DHS-wide effort, a county-wide effort, in the sense that we are focusing today on all of you, but this is something that we're addressing at all of our facilities.
So thank you. Thank you very much for bringing up the Restorative Care Village, because I think that's an important component of what it's an innovative approach to implementing an environment that's going to address a number of the things that we've talked about today. We really believe that the continuum of care is providing the right care for the right person at the right time. And robust care coordination is really a part of that planning process. What the Restorative Care Village hopes to do is decompress our emergency rooms, allow for shorter wait times in our emergency departments because alternative services will be provided on campus, and have families, and it'll actually we will be building this on LA USC campus, all of you, MLK, Rancho, and Harbor. The project is in the process currently, and we hope to have it complete by December 2021, so within the next 2 years. Next slide.
And just to add to Judy's comments, this is something that the Board of Supervisors, to strike a point, unanimously all 5 have really been supportive of, and that's why you're seeing these restorative care villages that are going up at every single county hospital facility across the county. So it's kind of underscoring, our joint venture with the city and our commitment to address the needs of the community in whole person care, in addition to the homeless issue.
This slide is the schematic for the new restorative care village. It will include a move of the current urgent care, psychiatric urgent care. We will be building a wellness center, a residential treatment buildings. There will be 5 of those, and a recuperative building. So it's quite a large project in the first phase of our master plan and all of you. The Mental Health Wellness Center is really going to be run by our partners in DMH, and they will be providing an array of outpatient mental health services and support services for those vulnerable clients who are experiencing serious mental illness. It's a recovery model that has a framework for all adult services provided and is based on the belief that adults diagnosed with mental illness can lead productive lives. Next slide. We currently, on the Olive View campus, have a mental health urgent care, but it's quite a distance from our main psychiatric emergency room. And so that building is going to be moved so that it's a part of this restorative village plan. And it will also be overseen by our partner with Department of Mental Health. It'll be a 24/7 operation, and it'll work closely with our psychiatric emergency room to help decompress that emergency room and see patients and refer patients and provide a continuity and continuum of care for those vulnerable clients. Next slide. The residential treatment program will provide a short-term alternative to the hospitalization to address some mental health needs. The residential treatment program services are really designed to resolve the immediate needs and improve the level of functioning for individuals so that they're able to return to a less intensive treatment environment. It's a short-term, not acute inpatient stay, but where patients with mental illness can reside for a period of time until they have their medications adjusted and those kinds of things.
The general average length of stay in the residential treatment program is about 3 to 4 weeks. So that's what you could typically expect out of this program.
And then the recuperative care services are a care coordination. They'll provide short-term housing for individuals recovering from acute illnesses. So those vulnerable population that needs a little bit longer in order to move to housing or to be able to live on their own. This is for patients that are both medically and psychiatrically released from the hospital. They'll provide both medical and mental health monitoring, meals, case management, coordination of care, transition to housing, supportive services, and assistance with establishing and reinstating the public benefits and transportation.
The great thing about the Recuperative Care Center as part of this project is that it's going to free up a lot of acute emergency beds that we see in the ERs currently being overtaken by people that are needing a longer stay. So it's not necessarily that all the patients will have a mental illness. A lot of the times people who enter recuperative care, maybe they can't climb to the second story of their home where their bedroom is. They need some sort of long-term solution to get past the ailment that they're facing. It could also be that they need wound care, kind of that chronic upkeep that a lot of people unfortunately currently have to get in the hospital, rather putting them in the setting and kind of being able to make more efficiently available the beds in the hospital.
We have some of our colleagues here who can help answer questions from Department of Mental Health, from our Sheriff's Department.
Yeah.
Did you want to sum it up?
And just want to reiterate, as you can see, as we're moving toward the restorative care village model, we really want to ensure that patients have a continuity of care. So because of that, you can clearly see that the discharging plan process is ongoing and very fluid. So as they move from one area to the next, that's something that's very important to the county and to the board in general, just ensuring that people are receiving the best and most appropriate level of care, and also they're discharged to either a home or a safe environment where they are better treated.
And the vast majority of the clients that this restorative care village will serve are already in the hospital. They're just accessing resources and care in the least efficient possible way, which is in an emergency room. This broadens that continuum of care, so we're going to see people entering the hospital being discharged to either recuperative care or the residential treatment program, depending on their level of need. And then once they are discharged of that, being linked to resources based in the community. If they are not housed, then they would obviously be linked to housing. And then there's an opportunity to have that follow-up in the outpatient center, which will also be on the Restorative Care Village campus. So this kind of brings us a bottom-up approach to healthcare and addressing the whole needs of the person, not solely a physical or a mental disability, but also, kind of others as well. So there's a lot going on, but we're happy to take any questions you may have.
Great. So I had a question about, so there's a number of other campuses that are also going through expansions. Are they on the same time frame?
They're on different time frames. So LAC, USC is a campus. They're looking at doing one at MLK Hospital, Olive View Medical Center. A lot of them are on different timelines. I know that the Rancho Los Amigos project, which is in Supervisor Han's district, is a little bit ahead of ours. But if I don't...
So they are on different timelines. However, the goal for most of them are the end of 2021.
Yeah.
Due to funding streams.
Yeah, so the funding comes from the California Healthcare Facilities Financing Authority, CHAFA, at the state level. And part of the stipulation with use of that funding is that these facilities have to be open and serving clients by the end of 2021. So that is a hard deadline, and we are working to meet that.
Are the number of beds that we're talking about comparable across all of the different facilities, or are some larger scale than others in terms of the project?
They're comparable, but they do vary in size, but they are within the same range. I know that there are more beds that are going to be proposed at the LAC USC campus and the MLK campus. They were done kind of looking at the need of the community and what we anticipated would be the appropriate number of beds for that community. So all of you, we looked at it as a level of need for the hospital.
Okay. And in terms of some of the demographic data points that we wanted to look at of all of you patients, what are we looking at in terms of the numbers that are housed versus unhoused of those patients that you guys have taken in?
This is new. The restorative care village concept is new. It's not currently under operation, so
But in terms of the facility, what are you seeing right now based at all of you's current operating programs?
As far as the recuperative, I think Libby.
Or mental health, like what are some of, in terms of what the patients that you're seeing, what are the numbers of individuals that you're taking in that have come in as either housed versus unhoused populations that you're servicing? Correct.
We see approximately, I think between the months of December and the end of May, we saw roughly just shy of 4,000 clients, or 4,000 visits.
Yeah, could you come to the mic? I'm sorry.
And could you state your name too? Thank you.
Yeah.
Good afternoon. I'm Latina Jackson. I'm the Service Area Chief for Service Area 2 with LA County Department of Mental Health. So the psychiatric urgent care on the campus of Olive View Medical Center, as I said, during the month between December and May 24th, 2019, we saw approximately 4,000 clients at the, or 4,000 visits at the psychiatric urgent care. Of those 4,000, approximately 3,000 were unique clients. Some people return for visits. And I don't have an exact number, but little less than 20% are experiencing homelessness is I think, a fair estimate. I can get exact numbers for you. We can pull those if you'd like them, but that's I think a pretty fair estimate. Most of the individuals that come through the psychiatric urgent care are from the community, and they come with, family members. The psychiatric urgent care is no different than like a medical urgent care that we might go to if you had the flu and you can't get into your doctor's office, or you need medication urgently and your doctor's office is closed. The psychiatric urgent care is designed for that purpose, to attend to psychiatric needs, and they're not all, most of the people that we see in the psychiatric urgent care are individuals who are experiencing anxiety or depression. That's the vast majority of who comes through the door. And then we, do have some other issues that people are dealing with, certainly.
So kind of broadly, among all the services that are provided, what would be kind of the most prominent of services that are sought at the facility right now? Would you say it's
medication support?
Medication support?
Yes, the vast majority of what we do in the psychiatric urgent care.
For the urgent care, but we do have a psychiatric emergency services where those patients that need acute admission to the hospital come as well. So that's part of what we already provide on campus. This is really the restorative care village is an adjunct and supportive services to what we're already providing.
And really providing a greater continuum of care so that we have proper discharge planning and people are getting exactly what they need and they're able to fully recover before they return home or, or get other treatment.
And right now, many of these patients are staying in the acute care facility while we do this continuum of care and transition them to the supportive services that they need when they really don't need to. And those beds can be available for patients that really need them. And that's really, it's decompressing the hospital and the emergency room that this will be a big focus.
That's great. The other part of the discharge policy that I wanted to get real clarity on is, in terms of the follow-up care and what that looks like, but also the transportation that's provided to them to help reconnect them with either family or their previous residency or whatever services. What does that all look like?
Sure. So that's great question. The transitions of care is really important. So what we do is we have to assess to see what the funding is. If they don't have any linkage to funding, we can apply for that right there for them or with them. And then if they do and they have a health plan, that sort of sets another sort of opportunities in motion. So for example, if they have a health plan, we know are able to identify who their primary care provider is and make a follow-up appointment for them, as well as the health plan provides the transportation. If they don't have a health plan, we're able to provide the transportation to be able to help get them to wherever they're going to be discharged to. And so that's any level of care, that's home, so we help to assess. But bigger than that, we really want to not just focus on how are they going to get from the hospital to the next place, but how do they sustain that? So really looking at and assessing the ongoing resources. So really how do we link them to things that are going to be sustainable because they need to get back to their appointment, they need to get back to or get to the grocery store, whatever they need to do. And so really looking at access services or the tap cards, things like that. So we just sort of assess for each individual patient. We have to work with them, right? I mean, they are really the ones that are driving it. We want to set up a plan that, one, fits what they need and what they're looking for and what their resources they have or what they have linkage to. So that's where that individualized plan comes in. So we do make the appointments. If they have linkage to primary care, ask them where they want to be followed up, and then we're able to do that or get them into a continuity care clinic if they don't have a primary care. So in the bridge, while they're getting assigned a primary care, they'll have somewhere to go for that follow-up. And then if for the transportation, we were able to do that actually prior to the bill.
And that's all, so they're all heavily case managed and just tracked and?
Yes.
And for what length of time generally, on average, would it be for a particular release patient?
Length of time?
That they are case managed. I mean, how long generally would that?
We have care coordination in all of our primary care clinics. So those patients are identified and they're followed up and they're called for their follow-up appointments. If there's any vulnerabilities or issues, they work on that as a team.
So there's a couple programs. So whole person care, the transitions of care program has been significant for us within the hospital setting. And that program is 30 days. So essentially what happens is the whole person care community health worker is able to help provide support outside the walls of the hospital. And so they're able to help follow them in the community, help do navigation back to the primary care and actually go to the visit with them, help to problem solve anything that happens between the time they leave the hospital and the time that they come back into their appointment. So they can help troubleshoot if they need durable medical equipment or something happens with their housing or some other resource. So they've been a huge bridge with us and with the patient in the system. In addition, what we have going to the board soon is the staffing plan to really be able to, in all of our primary care clinics, we have the first phase 1 sites. Now we're moving to phase 2 sites, which includes all of you, where we will have a team of people within primary care that's going to be able to address issues around mental health, really integrated healthcare. So mental health, the substance use services, it'll be social work, casework, substance use counselors, and community health workers embedded directly in primary care, so that we can have the continuity between inpatient and outpatient, and have a team of people that's help. And that time frame is open, because as long as they're a patient within the primary care setting, they will have access to that team.
And if I could, and likewise, in terms of specialization, the Department of Mental Health also has a wing of the whole person care program, and we can do the first 90 days in one program if the person is, if things are shored up at that point, we can, stop the case management at that point, or we can extend to 1 year for someone who needs additional support. And then we also have more intensive programs within the department. If someone needs support in perpetuity, like intensive support, we can provide that as well. So really, much like the Restorative Care Village, we're looking at the continuum of care around facilities. We're also looking at the continuum of care around case management and ongoing support needs. And really, gearing and personalizing that care and that case management support to the individual.
Thank you. I don't know if any of my colleagues had any questions or not. No? Okay. Well, I want to thank you all. I appreciate this very much. I know you've all been part of some of the community engagement that we've had, and this is an important conversation for us to have, obviously, not just because it's opening in all of you, but I know many of my colleagues are going to be having these same questions, so I think it's very timely given the work that we're doing, and we're very appreciative of the partnership that we have with the county to help comprehensively address the strategies as it relates to homelessness and assure that people are getting the proper care. And so I want to thank you all very much for making the time to be here and participate in this conversation and to provide such a comprehensive overview on this new, some of the efforts that are being ongoing there. And with that, colleagues, I want the city departments that are here today that have heard the presentation, I know some of them are going to kind of go back and digest and also have potentially any additional questions that might come of this, so that we can all continue to collectively work to, address any potential shortcomings in whatever we might identify that I might have missed in this conversation. So I know we want to continue and discuss internally about what was presented today. So I'd like to recommend that we continue this item and instruct the CLA to provide a summary report of those discussions and any potential recommendations that come from them. And with that, colleagues,
yeah.
Okay, go ahead and
That'll be the order. We'll continue and we'll request the CLA do a.
Yeah. So thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time.
Thank you very much. All right. That brings us to item 8. If you need to stretch, it's going to be a presentation, kind of something we've all been waiting for. So if you could please read item 8.
Item number 8, motion of Farrell Krikorian relative to Los Angeles County programs that impact homelessness in the city and discussion of the 2019 point-in-time count of homeless individuals and policy and funding recommendations.
Thank you. And before Mr. Lin begins, let me just make a few quick remarks. We know the homeless count came out yesterday. We know that there was a comprehensive presentation to the County Board of Supervisors yesterday, and the numbers came out, and people are digesting them and weighing in, and it's an increase in homelessness. Not a surprise. We knew in advance that the numbers would be up in the county and the city. But what I just want to talk about, because there's been lots of articles, lots of opinion pieces about this in various publications, broadcasts, et cetera. And with all of this, there's just so much misinformation that's already getting out there. We heard some of it here that was repeated by items heard in the media. So no judgment on that, but for example, we have an HHH project up and running already with 49 permanent housing units.
Correct.
Already.
That's correct.
By the end of this calendar year, we'll have more, and in less than a year, we'll have more again.
That's correct.
So what I want to say to anyone who's listening is that the media doesn't always get it right. It's interesting when numbers come out and it's not good news, how many experts come out of the woodwork to interpret the numbers and the data. And I think it's unfortunate in a lot of ways. So I will say this, one homeless person is one person too many. There's no question about it. None of us on the city council, none of us in the city leadership like what we heard yesterday, nor are we sitting on our hands about it, nor have we been idle on this effort. I can just say from personal experience, 6 years ago when I was a brand new council member, the rent-burdened population in Los Angeles was, as far as renters who were paying more than 30% of their income, was fairly high. Well, now it's over 50% of renters in Los Angeles.
Correct.
It's very, very simple math.
That's correct.
Rising rental costs and low wages or not enough job opportunity. There's a reason this committee is called Homelessness and Poverty. So I want to really stand up for this council, my colleagues and I, and the city leadership, because we've been working on these issues since all of us came aboard. And what we're faced with didn't happen overnight. It was decades in the making. Does that excuse anything? No, it doesn't. But I think that when we talk about this, we need to talk about it understanding the full context. And let me just say this. We have so much that we need to accomplish, and we need to really stop with the recriminations. We need to really get on the same page and support ideas and explore solutions with a sense of urgency. When we weaponize language, and it's all over social media, it's not helpful at all. But when we argue and when we express frustration, we express and acknowledge the tension that is there, that's a healthy thing. There's a huge difference between expressing tension and frustration at lack of progress and an entirely different context when someone claims that I am pro-eviction. And that needs to end because it doesn't help in the argument at all. And I'm not going to second guess anyone who speaks here who's passionate about getting people housed and giving them the services they need. And you know what? I don't think anyone should second guess us either. We're working hard. We're going to work harder. You all motivate us to do that, to work even harder. And it is a collaboration in that sense. So I just wanted to put that out there. We are building affordable units, rent covenanted for 55 years in the many thousands right now in production across Los Angeles. We are building and have funded and designed within a handful of years housing in the tune of over 6,000 units. We're going to be moving hundreds and thousands of people in a few short years into housing built by HHH with the services that are provided by Measure H. And that's what the voters expect righteously. And we are putting pressure on ourselves to expedite and push that forward. However, we have a fiduciary responsibility. It's not enough that someone just says, well, we're leaving money on the table. That's patently false. And those who claim that, what does that mean? We don't do any oversight? We have to do oversight on $1.2 billion. That's our job, and that's what we're doing. All of that with a great sense of urgency. And let me just tell you, in terms of like the shelters, the bridge housing shelters, the residents there are welcome to stay there all day long with their pets, with their animals, with their belongings, with their books, with their valuables. They're not turned out in the morning and invited back at dusk. They're there all day long. That's how the bridge housing works. So there are a lot of things that are said that just aren't accurate. And so let's have an honest conversation about the root causes, about how we need to have more of an inclusive economy that doesn't exclude anyone. And let's talk about job creation, and let's talk about the production of affordable housing across the city in every neighborhood, because there's a lot of NIMBYs that fight it and file lawsuits that stop it. And when it enters into the system, we can't override a judge's determination. That's just a fact. And if Mr. Bonin had to leave, but he's facing that in Venice. And there's a lawsuit, and it has to be played out in the courts. So we're working hard. We're going to work harder. We don't like the numbers. We're not satisfied with them. And we're here to work with LAHSA, all of our partners, for innovative solutions that we can move more quickly, and that's part of the innovation initiative. And we look very forward to hearing this. So Mr. Lynn's going to give a presentation on what these numbers mean. We're going to ask lots of questions. Yeah. And Mr. Marquise Harris-Dawson would like to say a few words, too.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to thank you for your comments this morning on the floor of the council. I thought they were in order, and your comments here in committee. I think it's important for us to engage in the rhetoric, and I'm not a big one on sitting around doing a lot of talking, but this moment really calls for it. It is a tremendous moral crisis that we're living in when the economy of the United States is performing better than it's ever performed, and the state of California is the center of its growth. Every one of these big corporations dotting downtown is making more money than they've ever made in the history of corporations. And so the idea that we, in that context, at that moment in history, we have 60,000 people living on the street is completely outrageous, and every one of us in the society needs to ask ourselves, what are we doing? Are we playing the game as called? Because the game as called is producing results that I don't want history to be written about me, that I was here when the economy was performing this way and we had 60,000 people on the street. And so I think, there's a good amount of hyperbole. There is a specific organizing model which I'm trained in that says go confront people, make outrageous statements about them, and cause a confrontation. There's a place for that. I understand and appreciate that. But in this moment, I think it's very, very serious. As we go out and criticize other people, and I have plenty of criticisms of people, starting with the White House going on down. But as we engage in criticism in this moment, all of us got to ask ourselves, what are we doing besides criticizing people? What are we doing to deal with this moral crisis? Because here's the deal. History doesn't get written that, oh, there were these people over here complaining, and, they were the righteous ones. What history says is everybody in the society participated in this. I'm sure there were plenty of people in Alabama against slavery for the 100 or so years that it went on. But history doesn't write about them. History writes about the society as a whole that allowed the situation, and that's what history is going to write about us unless we all get busy, all hands on decks, and actually fix the problem.
Well said. Thank you. Very well said.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Council members, I appreciate the opportunity to present the results of the 2019 homeless count. I also appreciate your observations with regard to both the long-term challenge that the community has faced with housing affordability and also the enormous disparities that we're facing right now in terms of a number of people who've been left behind by our booming economy. Both of those are true, I think. A history of federal investment, underinvestment in California would show a really stark picture of what our share of federal affordability dollars over the last several decades. And then the last few years when CDBG and home dollars have been slashed to ribbons, that has really harmed our ability to move forward. And the states pulling CRA dollars also hurt. All of those created a moment where, when we needed more affordability, it was actually getting worse. But looking at the story of homelessness in 2019 in Los Angeles, it's a story of a homeless assistance system that has grown to the place where it can help thousands of people out of homelessness on an annual basis, even as thousands more are falling into homelessness on a daily basis. Our investment from the LA County voters and the people of the city of Los Angeles in homeless services yielded in a few short years double the number of people we've been able to house, triple the number of people we've been able to connect through outreach, and it's a much more robust outreach, and triple the number of people we've been able to prevent from falling into homelessness. But this is a safety net of last resort. We have a challenge with housing affordability that, as you identified, is the worst in the nation. That is putting tremendous pressure on Angelenos, and we have one of the highest poverty rates in the state, which under the federal supplemental poverty measure has the highest poverty rate in America. So we have a real challenge in terms of that gap. Our homeless count did record more people experiencing homelessness both in the city and in the county. I want to stress the picture of the dynamics of homelessness as I walk through what we saw and how these data evolved. also want to talk about the individuals that we're discussing. We talk about numbers in the tens of thousands. It's very easy to elide over the fact that these are individual persons or individual stories, and we address them one by one. The outreach that takes place is an individual outreach that's tailored to the person that they're talking to, meeting them on the ground where they are. I also want to thank the thousands of volunteers who turned out across the communities of Los Angeles to help us do the count. We couldn't do this without those volunteers, and that 8,500 volunteer drive that actually got people out, and we were able to cover every census tract in the county of Los Angeles. The count takes place every year at the last 10 days of January because that is what HUD has asked every continuum, every community that receives federal assistance to conduct the count during that period. There are reasons for that. Most people who are homeless in America are sheltered. So 2/3 of the population of people experiencing homelessness nationally are in shelter, and it is actually easier to count people in shelter for reasons that are probably obvious. Most communities have some form of inclement weather program, so there's actually more shelter deployed in the winter. So that actually adds to the pool of shelter. And the reason they do it at the end of the month is that there are a very large number of Americans, as there are a large number of Angelenos, who use their benefits at the first half of the month and keep themselves in motels or other very low-cost housing, and then when their dollars run out, they move out into the street. And there are people who spend their entire year in that state of oscillation between having some period housed and some period homeless. But if you count at the end of the month, you're getting people who are on that edge, and you're not missing them at the beginning of the month where they might be in a motel paying their own way. So there are reasons why the count takes place when it does, and it is every community across America doing the same count. So we have minimized chance of duplication of people who, it is a population that moves around, and we all get a sort of one-time snapshot of the best opportunity we have. Ours is the most complex count in the country. We have by far the largest unsheltered population, which is the hardest group to count. That is the part we call the street count, and that's where the volunteers go out and we grid out the county with census tracts. At the same time we're doing that, we count in our shelters. About half that inventory participates in our homeless management information system, so we can capture that information directly out of HMIS. Another half are, include our faith-based programs that, as the man who spoke earlier, he alluded to spending time in two of our missions. Those are also shelter, and they also count, but we count them through a different means. They report to us what they've seen. And then at the same time, people who are living in motels that are funded by the government or funded by charitable organizations are also considered to be homeless for this purpose, since they're not unable to carry their own payment in those motels. We gather that information at the same time. So all of that becomes our sheltered population. Our youth count is conducted separately, since that is a challenging population. It is a population that has unique vulnerabilities and often is not visible during the night. So we do a daytime survey. We use youth peer navigators and demographers to go out and assess people on the street. We talk to all the youth in a statistical sampling area, whether it's a hotspot or a known area where we've seen homeless youth in the past or an area where we're not expecting to see youth. We gather all that information. So the surveyors assess people if they're in the age range, whether they look homeless or not. It's actually many youth who are homeless are trying very hard to present themselves as not homeless, and many housed kids look pretty raggedy. So it's not a visual sample that you can take it very easily. It's why we survey people. Look, you would have said that about me when I was a kid. I won't show you the pictures, but that would have been your assessment of me when I was a lad. But that's the way we conduct the youth count. And then the last piece, so we have the street count, but we don't know much about the people that we saw. That's why we do thousands of surveys county-wide. Again, a sampling methodology. There are several thousand of those surveys, so we have a rich picture of what people experiencing homelessness, what their characteristics are, and what their experience is. USC provides our statistical and demographic consultant. Every year we work with HUD to revise our methodology, and it is the most robust in the country. Again, one of the most challenging counts that there is. As we were compiling the data for this report, we were also taking note of the reports that were coming in from our colleagues across the state. And across the state, we saw most continuums reporting increases. Now, most continuums don't do an annual count. They are required by HUD to do a count every 2 years, and this is a mandated year, so that's why we're seeing these reports. Most of them are reporting a 2-year increase. So if you look at those data, these are 2 years, and 22 of them reported an increase of the ones who have reported so far. 6 showed decreases. The decreases were in the single digits. The increases were double digits, sometimes triple digits. A significant rise in homelessness across the state. Locally, we saw in the County of Los Angeles a 12% increase. In the City of Los Angeles, a 16% increase. That's a year on year. If you want to compare those data to the previous slide where we're showing the other continuums, County of Los Angeles increase was 7% over 2 years. The City of Los Angeles was 9.5% over 2 years. So that would be a direct comparison to those other continuums where, for example, Orange County is reporting 40%, Kern is reporting 64%. The comparable data for the County of Los Angeles would be 7%. And that is a direct impact from the resources we've been able to deploy based on the confidence that the voters had that we could actually address this problem with resourcing. It's easier to tell this slide when it's animated and not a PDF, so there's a lot of numbers on here. I want to walk through it. One thing we want to illustrate is the severe challenge that poor Angelenos are facing with regard to the housing affordability crisis. And I appreciate the remarks from the council members who addressed that crisis. There are many data points you could look at to illustrate that. We picked the number that was represented in the Harvard Joint Center on Housing Studies report from last year. They haven't issued this year's report yet, should come out this month, but they found 721,000 renter households that are severely rent burdened. That means they're paying more than half their income for rent. That's a group that's really hanging on by their fingertips.
I'm sorry.
More than half their rent. So this is 50% of household income is going to rent. And these are households, so that's 3 persons on average. That's over 2 million Angelenos where more than half their income is going for rent. And the other cost of living is pretty high here. That's a group that's...
That means if 2 people are working, all of one person's pay goes to housing.
At a minimum. At a minimum. This is a really challenging stat. Actually, if you think about, there are different ways of looking at this challenge. There was a report from the Federal Reserve that came out earlier this month that looked at national stats, and they said 4 out of 10 Americans would struggle to find $400 to meet an immediate financial crisis. 27% of them would have to sell something or borrow from friends or put money on a credit card that they couldn't then pay off in order to meet $400. 12% of Americans couldn't find $400 by any means. That's 30 million Americans, and if you translate that to Los Angeles, that's 950,000 adult Angelenos who couldn't make a car repair emergency and pay their rent.
County?
And that's a county number. 2/3 of that would be, So if you think about the large number of people who are extraordinarily pressed, if you can't fix your car and get to your job and make your rent, you're in a real bind. And that's an enormous number of Angelenos. If we look at last year's count, which is on the left-hand side of the screen, we saw about 53,000 people county-wide. Based on the information that we got from the homeless count and the number of people who were immediately newly homeless, we estimate 55,000 people over the course of the year would also have fallen into homelessness. So remember, the point in time is a snapshot, but obviously over the course of a year, things are happening. And so that means that in 2018, over 108,000 people would have experienced homelessness during the year in total. We were able to prevent 5,600 people from falling in based on the resources that we're able to deploy, largely through Measure H. And through the resources of the system, which includes largely Measure H, but also the continuum of care and many other resources that are deployed, we were able to house 21,631 people out of homelessness last year. That is a 23% increase over what we were able to do in the year before that. We estimate, based on the final results, that about 27,000 people who experience homelessness at some point were able to resolve homelessness on their own or with minimal assistance, maybe a shelter stay, maybe some outreach help, leaving 59,000 people roughly homeless in this count. So it's a dynamic process. People are falling in and being lifted out on a daily basis. If we look at the core result that we're seeking to achieve through homelessness assistance is housing placements. And we grew that by 23% last year. That's more than double the people we were able to house 5 years ago in 2014 before these measures were available to us. And looking at the ways that folks are able to exit using assistance from the homeless crisis system, about a third are housed through rapid rehousing, which is our short-term intervention. It's pretty flexible, so there's a variety of means, but it's short-term financial assistance, short-term case management assistance. About a quarter are housed through permanent supportive housing. That is a durable rental assistance program with deep wraparound supportive services. And then 42% are housed through what we call other permanent housing, and that's along the lines of what we were discussing before, connecting people back with their family and friends, getting people moved into a shared housing unit, getting them onto a Section 8 voucher where that's not permanent supportive housing, or other affordability like federal Section 202 programs for seniors and other affordable housing programs. Wide variety of means to get people connected, including getting them connected to a community that's not in Los Angeles. As we were discussing, there are many lenses into the challenge we have with housing affordability. As you were alluding to, if you look at the minimum wage in the city and county of Los Angeles at $13.25 an hour, 79 hours would be necessary to keep someone in a one-bedroom unit here at the area median rent. Obviously, that gets more challenging for households with families that need bigger units. And the California Housing Partnership made their report released earlier this month, estimating that the County of Los Angeles needed over 500,000 units of affordability just to cover the needs that it's currently in our population of Angelenos. As a system, we wanted to also represent the impact that the growth of resources has had on our capacity to serve people. So if we look at our preventions programs, they're more than triple the people served through prevention. That's stopping people from falling in when they present in a crisis, but they're still housed. Our outreach and engagement was able to connect with 3 times as many people. We have 34,000 people engaged in outreach last year, and that's not just a bottle of water and a hello. These are people who have been assessed, which means that we had a relationship with them durable enough to get through pretty personal assessment plans, and a housing plan has been created for them. So that represents a depth of real connection with people. Our interim housing or shelter inventory was able to serve about a third more people, but again, very different programming. Before we started this, these were overnight shelter beds, 14 hours, 2 hot meals and a cot and a shower, and you're out. This is 24-hour shelter, and it's connected to our housing program. So each of these has case management. These are people who are exiting. So when we look at the number from pre-Measure H for interim housing, 19,000 persons served, the percent of people who exited to permanent housing was about 6%. If you look at the almost 25,000 who went through our crisis and bridge housing now, 27% of the people who exited to permanent housing. So that's a tremendous impact growth in terms of what that resource is actually able to do. And then, of course, we're focused on housing placements, which, again, were over 21,000. As you indicated, there is an enormous pipeline of housing about to come out for this population. Prop Triple H is serving resources. We have the county's Affordable Housing Trust Fund that's also deployed, and we are about to unlock No Place Like Home funding from the state that will deliver many more units. So we have about 1,400 units that are scheduled to open in 1920. Obviously, construction timelines come into play and so forth, but there are over 10,000 units between the City of LA, the County of LA, and also supported by state funding that are going to come online. As we look at the details of what we saw, the primary focus of everyone's attention is usually the unsheltered population. That is 3/4 of the people experiencing homelessness in Los Angeles, both city and county. We saw increases in people living in their vehicles. We saw increases in people living in tents and makeshift dwellings. And then, of course, we do see people who are just in a bedroll, something along those lines, and count those folks as well. I think the most notable increase that we saw was about a 32% increase in tents. It was a very wet winter, as you recall, and there were many more people living in tents. There were fewer people in each tent. So where there might have been 2 people in a tent last year, those 2 people were each in a tent this year. We take note of that when we do the demographic survey, and we apply the correct multiplier for that. Outreach to this population has improved dramatically, as we were discussing before, and there are more outreach workers deployed countywide to address the needs of people who are experiencing unsheltered homelessness. And of course, connecting them to our housing programs is the key goal. On our shelter portfolio, about a quarter of the people that we counted were sheltered, a little less than 15,000. That's a significant increase of funded shelter beds that we're able to deploy in the city and in the county, over 1,800 new interim beds. And as I indicated, 27% of the people who exited that inventory that we fund publicly exited to permanent housing. So it's a great improvement in the way that we're actually able to use that resource. There are more than 1,600 beds in the pipeline, considering all the different sources, including the kinds of beds that we were just talking about. One lens to look at homelessness is in the subpopulations. Veterans are the population that has the deepest set of resources available. The federal government has invested year after year in increased funding for short-term rental assistance through the Supportive Services for Veterans Families program, and also deep supportive services and permanent supportive housing through the HUD-VASH program. That is the only population that the federal government has continued to invest in resources for, and resources matter. This is the only population where we actually saw a decrease despite new inflow into homelessness. We're a slight decrease, but this is basically holding our own against the pressures of more people falling into homelessness. We're able, yes.
I want to make sure I'm reading this right. By a slight decrease, we mean 12?
That is correct. So it's not, yeah, we're talking about a fraction of a percent. Less than, it would round to zero. But this is where, if you look at the number of people we counted last year, 3,900 people in our shelters and unsheltered, we were actually able to house over 2,800 veterans last year, and the number barely moved. So that's a story of inflow. Veterans are highly vulnerable to homelessness for reasons that are pretty complex and outside the scope of this discussion, but they're heavily overrepresented in homelessness versus their share of the general population. They're falling in on a regular basis. We're able to lift them out, and this is a story where resources tell, but it's actually not quite sufficient to stay ahead of this.
Peter, real quickly on that.
Yeah.
So veterans that are falling into homelessness, are they trending younger?
We haven't actually done that analysis. They have tended to be an older cohort, similar to the aging of the population overall, and we're tending to see it has been. Actually, we can bring that
fallout
back.
From the Iraq War.
Right. It's a really good point. It's something that we also want to look at. And we also saw an increase in youth, and I think there were other folks, but we ask their term of service, so that's an analysis that we can do. Yeah. I mean, not their term of service, their period of service. Right, that's right. Deployment time. Yeah, that's right. We did see an increase in family members experiencing homelessness. It was less than the overall total, and that is based on, again, resources matter. So, this is a population that we've seen twice as many families presenting to the Los Angeles Family Crisis System in the first half of this fiscal year. That's at least one adult and at least one minor. So it's not, two adults together obviously is a family, but it's not a family for the definition here. And it does not include unaccompanied minors. We counted more families. We were actually able to house nearly all the people that, we counted last year, and still the number went north. Obviously the financial pressures that renters are under are magnified for families. Chronic homelessness went up higher than the average, and this is a fact that while we do have resources for people experiencing chronic homelessness, they are not enough, and that's why the Prop Triple H units are very needed. We're able to house folks in permanent supportive housing, but there is a group of the group of people for whom we have the least resources are the sort of everyone else category. That is the biggest single group of people. They're people who are not youth, not families, not veterans, not chronically homeless. And as those folks are on the street, those with disabilities or those who develop disabilities while they're on the street time into the definition. So chronic homelessness is at least a year on the street and some disabling condition. So that, you can time into that, or It's also a group that people with disabilities can experience multiple episodes of homelessness. They may not have been homeless last year and have fallen in at this point. So there's a number of different factors, but largely this is a case of people timing into the definition to drive this increase. We were able to house nearly 5,000 people who were experiencing chronic homelessness last year, and we still lost ground against this challenge. Youth, we saw the largest increase. So from 3,200 in our continuum, when I come back to present to the full council, I'll have city-specific data on all of these. I want to emphasize.
What kind of data do you have on in terms of specific to youth, where they come from?
Yeah, we do. It has historically been the case that youth have reported that their last place of stable residence is outside the county at a greater rate than the adult population.
Yeah,
So
in Hollywood, we deal with runaways.
I think it's a mix. There are youth who flee domestic violence. There are youth who are edging out of foster systems in other places, and Los Angeles can be a beacon community for folks. I think there are a lot of it's really hard to tell what the impact of the national picture and the political environment that has worsened in some areas, particularly for LGBTQ kids who may not feel welcome in their home or in their community. But obviously, this is a dynamic population as well. So we have traditionally seen a higher percentage of youth from outside of LA County. We were able to house more youth last year, up from 1,700 housed in 2017 to 2,000 housed last year, but again, the numbers still increased. We're looking further upstream with our Department of Child and Family Services to work on exit planning, and with our probation department partners, and also with host home and youth family reconnection programs that is a successful model. Last year we saw an increase in seniors over 62, which was the only population that showed an increase, and it was 22%, which is quite alarming actually in a year when the total went down. This year we saw less of an increase it was about 8%, and it's still obviously a significant increase, but not as much as the overall population. We were able to house 1,400 seniors last year, and we were actually able to shelter a considerable increased amount. We're working closely with our partners in the senior centers and in adult protective services to focus resources on seniors who are at greatest risk. One of the questions that, so we ask a number of demographic questions about people. One of the things I would like to draw your attention to is, first, if you look at the pie chart, the purple chunk, so almost a quarter of the people express that this is their first lifetime experience of homelessness. Not only are they newly homeless, they've never experienced homelessness before, and they're newly homeless in 2018, so they are less than a year homeless. This is a group of people who have never experienced it before, and we see people falling in and out of homelessness on a fairly regular basis. This group is unique. 40% more are still on their first episode and are still out on the street. So they are first episode. So when we reported 9,200 people who were newly homeless last year in their first year, some group of that is in this 40%. We were not able to help them, and they're still out there. And that's a group that we really want to focus in on. And then the last 37% here have been multiple episodes of homelessness. These are the folks who are the most economically fragile and where they have had multiple cycles of homelessness. Top reason that the newly homeless first time last year cited was economic hardship. Rent burden, evicted, lost their job. Second most common reason was what we would sort of think of as fragile or frayed social networks. So divorce, lost a loved one, had no one to turn to in a crisis. Those are both, in my mind, representative of economic challenges as well, but people frame them as, the divorce caused my homelessness. Well, you couldn't find a unit you could afford. That's a real challenge. We ask people, as I said, what their immediate, statement of their cause of homelessness. About 5% report that it's domestic or intimate partner violence. And most of those are adults, but about 11% are transition-age youth, and that is about 55% female, about 43% male, and about 2% transgender. We're working very closely with the domestic violence shelter providers and the inventory of resources that face into survivors in that space to make sure that there are good connections between our resources and theirs. We ask people about their health characteristics as well, and I think one of the things that I hear I get asked all the time, don't they all have mental illness? Well, the folks that you remember may have mental illness, but actually when we interview people, and this is it's a question that has been fairly consistently asked, and it's asked in plain language. 25% report that they have a history with serious mental illness, so that's a long-term mental illness. About 14% report that they have a substance use disorder, or problem drinking, and there's about a 10% overlap between that. So either or both is 29% of the population. The vast majority of people actually report neither of those and are mostly in the condition of having just economic challenges and other challenges getting. There are obviously people who have physical disabilities, chronic health problems in that group as well. We also ask questions with regard to race and ethnicity as we're talking to people, and one of the characteristics of homelessness in Los Angeles and nationally is a dramatic overrepresentation of African Americans in people experiencing homelessness. So if you look at the countywide population, which is in the light blue bars, and you look at the people experiencing homelessness, which is in the darker blue bars, 33% of people experiencing homelessness are African American countywide. That is against an 8% population of people in the county who are African American. So that is roughly 4 times overrepresented against their share of the general population. That is a sample that has been standout demographic and was one of the facts that was brought forward during the work of the ad hoc committee on black people experiencing homelessness of the LAHSA Commission. There was the gentleman who spoke earlier about the First Native population. Actually, that is also a heavily overrepresented demographic. It's not a very large number in our continuum, but 1.7% against 0.2% is also heavily overrepresented. And the population is 2/3 male, about 31% female, and report 2% trans and less than 1% gender nonconforming and non-binary folks.
So, I'm sorry, so can you go back? I wanted to see that. So it's male Hispanics are the largest demographic?
I'm sorry, can you ask that again?
You said it's male Hispanics are the largest population of?
The largest share demographically of any demographic would probably be African American males, but I would have to go. This is overall the population is the gender stats, but I would have to go. I'd have to dig into the crosstabs if you would like to see which stand out. Males are heavily overrepresented in homelessness. That is true. Latinos are relatively underrepresented in homelessness vis-a-vis the share in the general population. So just under half the population of the county is Latino, and about 36% of people experiencing homelessness are Latino. So that would, we can bring back, more detailed statistics with regard to that if you'd like. And we can look at, we can look at families and also the youth population for these as well. We ask people how long they've been in LA County, and we ask people where their last place of residence before becoming homeless was. And this is a question that we've asked consistently over the years. 65% report that their episode of homelessness started here in LA County. There are slightly more folks out of state and other Southern California counties reported this year. We see 75% of people have a history of more than 5 years here. So there are people who have a history in LA County who've experienced homelessness someplace else and may be coming back. So there's data that suggests that low-income Angelenos are actually having to leave Los Angeles County to find places they can live. If you don't make it there, you may come back here. So this is a fluid number, and this is a phenomenon we want to look at. So there's a slight change here in these data this year. Every service planning area in the county went up from a count perspective, but they didn't go up evenly. Antelope Valley and San Fernando Valleys and our South Bay areas showed the least increases. The heaviest increases were in the San Gabriel Valley on our west side and in and in South Los Angeles. So, it was those that are where the sort of the city of Los Angeles is showed actually a greater increase. Supervisorial districts, a similar mix, which reflects that pattern as well. And we do look at city council districts each year. I would say that the fluctuations here are magnified since the boundaries are pretty fluid and the numbers are fairly small. So I think it's very easy to overemphasize these shifts. This is a population that can move fairly quickly. The boundaries are pretty close to each other in most districts, and so these shifts are probably this probably wouldn't reflect the conditions now 5 months later. And this is an area where it's I think it's a little easy to overemphasize, but I think we represent these data back out, but it's important to realize that this is a fluid population, and the magnitude of shifts can work pretty quickly when, for example, cleanups are taking place. So if you think about the impact of the investments that have been made by the voters of the County of Los Angeles and the City of Los Angeles, there were 8,600 people housed with Measure H last year out of the 2,160. Had we not housed those folks and seen them in our numbers, we would have seen increases in homelessness similar to what our neighbors saw. I think this is the fact that our over even though we have the least affordable housing market in California, we're showing lower increases in homelessness is representative of the fact that we're actually able to lift more people out of homelessness. Clearly, it's a crisis. People are falling in on a regular basis. We are scaling up to meet more of the need, but we do not yet have the resources to address all of the need. I think rent protections are a key factor as we look to a pipeline of developing affordable housing. Protections against increases, protections against unjust evictions would be welcome. Those were positions that the LAHSA Commission took, advocating with the state, and they are urgently needed. I think watching some of the bills that were on the table stall out was pretty disheartening. And then, of course, we always want to provide people with information about what individuals can do. We are inviting folks to participate in the United Ways Everyone In campaign, and then there are a number of ways that people can participate in their local community, whether signing up to volunteer with organizations through LAHSA's website, which connects them to local service organizations, and certainly to participate in the count next January. Save the dates, 21, 22, 23 for January 2020. TheyCountWillYou.org. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you very much. So I have so many questions, but I'm going to try to abbreviate everything because the hour is getting so late.
Yes, sir.
But, and then you're going to come back on the 26th to the full council.
That's right. That's right. And we'll try to give more city-specific demographics so that you have a picture of that.
That'll be helpful. So I'm going to just try to keep it pegged to this result here. So 81% of the increase of the county's numbers is due to the increase in the city's numbers, right? So that's 81% of that increase is the city of LA increase.
I think that's fair.
The 12 to 16%, et cetera. So just want to put out there if LAHSA's allocation of resources will be commensurate with that. It would go to reason that it would be, but I just want to make sure that it is.
So the funding algorithms that we have are based on the funding decisions that are made by the Board of Supervisors with regard to the funding that flows through the county and through, obviously, the city funds, general funds fund operations within the city of LA. So we work to make sure that while city funds are deployed, they're deployed within the community of the city of Los Angeles. The funding algorithm from the Board of Supervisors has gone by service planning area. So it should fit to those numbers as well. And generally that has followed the pattern that where the service planning areas intersect with the city of Los Angeles, those get the most resources. So in general, the algorithm does follow the need, and I think it effectively does work that way.
Yeah, and it kind of goes back to what you said, don't overemphasize the the migration necessarily based on the 3-day snapshot.
Yeah, we worked with the Board of Supervisors to change the funding algorithm so it's not the current year's count, but a 2-year rolling average, which tends to sort of, reduce some of the variation. Because I think it's, one challenge we have is if the funding moves very rapid, the numbers can shift dramatically. The borders are all closed, people move around. If those percentages are pretty dramatic, we can whipsaw the providers from a funding perspective. So we worked to sort of smooth those out. But in general, the funding follows the need.
And maybe you can extrapolate this for us, and maybe it was covered in here to a degree, but in terms of the coordinated entry system and the data related, how the numbers have increased or decreased in the past few years, a 2-year snapshot of that.
So it's a really interesting question. Obviously, the expansion of these resources has allowed for a dramatic increase in both the number of services provided. So we have many more people out deployed providing services, and the programming has expanded.
Was that our last call?
I guess they're calling us, right? Yes. I'll stop. But the other thing to really note is that it's a sort of it's not just quantity; it's quality of the services being provided has dramatically improved, and that's through implementation of best practices, training, better program models. But I will say that if we look at these data and the number of people who flowed through here, we touched 75,000 individuals in an enrollment into some form of the coordinated entry system programming over the course of the year. So that's almost 3/4 of the people we think experience homelessness at all in 2018 were enrolled in some program. It might have been as light as an outreach enrollment or as light as our winter shelter program, but more than 160,000 enrollments occurred. So each, like the average was over 2 enrollments per person. So you had a thorough engagement with an outreach worker and built a housing plan, went into our shelter programs and maybe executed that housing plan. So the capacity of the coordinated entry system to actually see more people but also capture that data has greatly improved. I will say that from that's a sort of flow over the year number. At a given moment, we just pulled the data for sort of right now. We have over 31,000 people who have been assessed. They have a housing plan, but for some housing resource, we could house them.
Right.
So if I had a rapid rehousing slot, some of those people have rapid rehousing and they're looking for housing in the market. So but for market units and but for housing resources, we could house over 31,000 individuals in a couple of months. So that's, when I hear people talk about service resistance, that is not true.
But that's a very important number right there. 32,000. If we had 32,000 units tomorrow, we would fill them. We would fill them all within a couple of months, based on the data from the case management that you already have.
That's correct. That is correct. So when we're filling these new bridge home slots, they're full in a couple of days. When we open a new permanent supportive housing site, they're full in a couple of days.
Oh, yeah.
So, but for the housing resources, we could make, that's 3/4 of the people who are unsheltered on our streets are enrolled in and engaged with and working with somebody.
So speaking of that engagement with the loss of teams and the database, does that include their acuity score as well, or their acuity percentage? So you have that, and that's okay.
Actually. So that would be from the HMIS data, not from the count data. I mean,
but just general intake.
Absolutely.
Case, okay.
So if that's of interest to the council, we could bring that back as a way of sort of representing who those folks are,
especially just like off the menu services that are then triggered and available, which I think will lead to what you just said, and that is if not for a unit. If only a unit were available, we'd be able to house them.
That's correct.
But yeah, that would be, I think, very helpful. And then how do you deal when you make an assessment that they have an acuity score? Implicit bias is a reality in our society.
Absolutely.
Do you have a mechanism to acknowledge that, address that, deal with that? You just mentioned how certain demographic groups are overrepresented in the homeless population.
Yes.
Is that a thing in terms of how we assess this data and which extends into services?
It's an excellent question. This is an area where more research needs to happen. So we're working with philanthropy, and we're working with the Homeless Policy Research Institute, which includes our major research institutes in, USC, UCLA, the other research institutes in LA, to sit down and investigate both the way the tools that we have are deployed and whether there are biases in the data that are captured. And, there is a national conversation about this. I will say there are not a wide variety of tools out there to use. It's unfortunately not the case that there is any number of different, well-recognized assessment tools off the shelf. Pretty much there's the one that we're using, the VI-SPA data. A few communities have built their own. There are some clinically based tools, but the scale here is really challenging for something that has to be clinically administered. And we don't have integrated medical data with HMIS. There are smaller communities that have things like that, where they could sort of say, okay, the health of this person is X based on what we know about their health records, and our acuity score says this.
Nothing will stop this hearing. Nothing.
So I don't need light. I can talk in the darkness.
Third time, I don't know.
I can talk all,
we could.
But there is work that needs to be done to research this exact point,
Yes.
and I appreciate you lifting it up.
They're going to cut off the mics next. So let's incorporate that theme somehow, because I think that could be, I don't want anything to get in the way of the data and housing people, but we hear things from people. We hear complaints, and I think that is something that we need to explore, and it should be on the table.
I'd like to bring that back as a report to the committee, and,
Be great.
and, I think it would be challenging we don't have enough data yet. It would be challenging to build it in for the presentation at the end of this month, but it is a really important topic, and I'd like to bring it back to the committee.
I'd love that. Okay, so I'm going to just power through these next two. LASA's relationship with HCID on service delivery. So the city produces affordable housing.
Yes.
How can we be a better partner with LASA and the county to have a mechanism where there's a common knowledge of the needs, and then there's a completely coordinated effort?
I think, it's a really astute question. Los Angeles is very complex. We work closely with HCID. We work closely with the now Los Angeles Community Development Authority, what used to be LACDC and HACOLA, and with the City Housing Authority, which provides the project-based vouchers, and with DHS that's using its supportive services. So there is a work group that focuses on that. It's pretty complex. LASA is the sort of keeper of the single database that shows the pipeline, so that we know that we're not overcounting. Each of those entities reports a number of units they're working on, but many are multi-funded, so we could sort of overcount. So we're working together. But I think that, the progress on pooling together capital funding and supportive services and the rental subsidies is ongoing. And I think it's an area where I think it would be helpful to have HCID and the CAO and CDA to come back and present on how we're working to coordinate those.
Because I feel strongly, we're out of the information loop on affordable housing, because we develop it, we build it, we work with private partners and nonprofit partners.
Oh, I was focused on permanent supportive housing. Yeah. I think the affordable portfolio, I agree. There's a lot of, it would be very valuable to have information, particularly for our homeless service providers.
It's enigmatic. It's an abstraction. I said nothing's going to stop it. We're going to continue. But Meg is here to add to this.
Yeah, just really quick, in anticipation of the Proposition HHH buildings beginning to open as well, we started a monthly meeting with HCID and LASA to make sure that we are, in position with the CES and better understanding how the CES is working on match to move in, to make sure that as we have this hopefully soon, huge influx of PSH units, that they can be filled quickly. And I think that understanding and kind of using that as an opportunity to even better improve communication, because I think the communication is very good as it is, but making sure that everything is, if we've identified ways to get out of our own way in that way, we may be able to also then look at whether and how affordable units, for example, could be made available through CES.
Right, Megan, because there is a direct link to rapid rehousing. May not be permanent supportive housing. It might be low-income affordable housing. So there's that link there.
It's very important. Access to that portfolio would be very valuable to the service providers.
Okay, we need to I think we need to grow that.
We're working on getting that
Terrific.
conversation going.
Lastly, community level census tract data.
Yes.
When might that be available?
So we are at the census tract data. It will be available, but it doesn't have demographics at the census tract level. We are releasing community level data. So we had hoped to get it done by the time we release this count, so that all the cities and all the communities and neighborhoods that we count and we lift those up. Usually it's taken us about a month after presenting the top level data to do that. There was an anomaly in the way that it came back to us from our partners at USC, because the way motel voucher programs are registered, they're registered at the administrative office of the program that's delivering it. So basically it looked like every DPSS field office was an enormous shelter, and that made certain communities look off. So we had to say, we got to do this again. So we filtered those out. They're running it again. We should be able to do that within a week or so to get community level and neighborhood data out, and that'll represent the whole county. So every city can see their own data, every neighborhood can see their own data. We do deep statistical dives in the demography for 3 communities: Skid Row, Hollywood, and Venice. So we will have a demographic picture for each of those communities as well.
Okay, that's going to be very helpful.
Thank you.
So I just want to say one thing before and we can open it up. Before you come back on the 26th, is I think, especially with this count, what I'm going to want to move toward very, very soon, I want to challenge ourselves. I want to challenge ourselves to actual homelessness reduction goals. Here we go. So Peter, I think we've been at this long enough. We have the resources that are unprecedented to a degree. I think we take numbers, and I think if we don't establish reduction goals, it stays in the abstract. It always stays in the abstract. I think that we need the goals. And so I would like to, in the coming months, zero in on what that could look like.
Okay.
Right? And start having those conversations.
Okay.
Terrific. Colleagues, you don't want to continue this? All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Really appreciate this.
Really appreciate the opportunity to discussion and the ongoing dialogue and the collaboration.
Thank you, Mr. Lin. All right. With that, no more items.
What was the action, sir?
Oh, the action. Thank you. So the action is adopt the motion. Adopt this motion. Thank you. Meeting is adjourned.